Okay, so Dodge announced a new concept for their first EV, and EVs are tech, right? Like, I'm a bit of a car guy, so I want to talk about this anyway, but we'll count this as a tech video because EVs, electric vehicles, are still technology. And I just kind of want to talk about it in terms of design, what I like about it, and some of the things that are my concerns, not just with this car, but just generally with EVs. And I figured this would be a good way to talk about it. So let's dive in and talk about my thoughts on the new Dodge Charger EV Daytona SRT Banshee. There's a lot of names for this thing, so let's just get started. So last week, Dodge showcased their EV concept, which was the Dodge Charger Daytona SRT Banshee. A lot of different names. It's going to be really funny to see them try to pack that all onto a brochure. But either way, they announced it, and they talked about how Dodge really wanted to make an EV that was a muscle car. And honestly, there are some things I really like, especially starting out with the design. So starting out with the design, I love the fact that it's retro-inspired. It's not a bad-looking car. I think that of the EV designs that are out there right now, Mustang Mach-E, I think that actually going back to the Charger look, the two-door Dukes of Hazzard Charger design, is a really smart move because, let's be honest, when the original Charger came out, not the original, but the sort of reboot, they made it a four-door, and they put those lines in it to kind of make it look like a two-door, even though it was very much a four-door, and it should have been a two-door, and I'm so glad they went back to that, even though it's still a 2x2 four-seater, so that's kind of nice. If the bucket seats on the inside actually make it to production, I am super into those. We'll talk about one of the design cues for that in a minute, but I love those buckets. Dodge has always been really good with bucket seats. I've sat in the SRT 8s, I've sat in the SRT 4 Caliber, and my personal favorite is the Viper inspired out of the SRT 4 Neon, which is actually what I have. I own one of those, I drive it. The best bucket seats I've ever sat in a car like that from the factory. There are obviously better bucket seats out there, but when it comes to from the factory bucket seats, Dodge has always been really on the top of their game. Now, one of the things in terms of design that I appreciate but also kind of take issue with is the wing or the scoop thing at the front. So they're calling it the Daytona, and they've got the wing at the front to reduce the actual drag on the car by 25%, according to Dodge, and that's really cool. I think that the whole hood scoop, but it's not really a hood scoop, it's like a wing on the front, I think that's pretty cool. It makes the light bar stand out a little better, but if you're going to call it the Daytona, the wing has to be the defining feature, and it can't be up at the front. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with the original Dodge Daytona, the original Dodge Daytona is an historically significant race car because it was the first NASCAR to break 200 miles per hour, and it has an iconic, massive rear wing for two reasons. One, because you had to be able to open the trunk, and two, because Chrysler's rocket engineers, Chrysler had a rocket division back in the 60s. It was pretty wild. Those engineers said that the wing had to be above the roofline to get clean air for better downforce. So if they're going to call this thing the Daytona, there better be a model down the road that has a massive wing that clears the roof. I'm just saying. And actually, speaking of things from the 60s, remember when I mentioned the seat design? Well, they put that little tri-star design on the front as well, and that is the Fratzog logo, which we haven't seen on a Dodge car since the 1960s. And this is really a callback, and in my opinion, a really odd decision, because that Fratzog logo was primarily put on things like the Coronet, which was a very premium car at the time, and they're putting it on a muscle car. I mean, yeah, Dodge has always made everything they've ever touched into a muscle car, like taking a Plymouth Duster and saying, hey, what happens if we make the front fiberglass and then put a massive engine in it? But like, there were some classier cars back in the day from Dodge, and that's where that logo went. It's just weird that they put it on this. But I guess if you're going to put the Fratzog logo on it, making it glow red for the taillight section is a pretty badass way to bring it back.
Badass.
And I guess reviving the Fratzog logo is also pretty appropriate because it is just a retro future designed car. And the only thing I would say I really don't like about the design itself is the weird roofline. It kind of doesn't work in a coupe design, in my opinion. I mean, here, hold on. Like, I just feel like this, the roofline here, the buttresses just go a little too far back. Maybe that's just me, but like the roofline just doesn't work for me, in my opinion. Maybe that's just me. But overall, in terms of design, I really do think that it is an appropriate look for the car. And considering that it is definitely going to be a replacement for the Charger at some point, going back to your roots with a two-door while still making it a somewhat viable sedan is the right move. And of course, with this being a concept, I would assume that there's still time for certain things to change, so maybe some elements of the design might change, but I know some things probably aren't going to make it into production, like the translucent vegan leather thing they put on the steering wheel for the controls, or the touch-sensitive window switches. Like, every Dodge I've ever ridden in either has crank windows or one or multiple of the window motors or switches have issues. I mean, hell, my SRT4, one of the switches doesn't quite work the way it should, and there's a secret handshake to it, and the passenger window goes up significantly slower than the driver's side window. So, sorry, but I feel like touch-sensitive, semi-transparent vegan leather isn't going to make it in as a button option for the production version of this car. Call me crazy, but I think that's going to be a thing. Now, in terms of the actual specs for this car, we didn't get a whole lot of information, but there are a handful of things that we did learn, like the fact that it is going to exceed the performance of the Hellcat in their marketing terms, every performance metric. So that's something to look forward to, considering that 717 horsepower is already insane. And considering we have cars like the Tesla Plaid, which is just a stupid fast car and really shouldn't be in the hands of the kind of people buying it, but are in the hands of them anyway, I think that meeting or exceeding the metrics of something like the Dodge Hellcats is a pretty impressive feat. We also don't know what the range is going to be, but they did mention that that reduction of drag, courtesy of that scoop in the front, is going to improve the range, of which we don't really know. And another thing we're not sure of yet is how the transmission is going to work, but it is going to be a multi-speed transmission. Now, I'm a bit old school. I like 3 pedals. I like rowing the gears myself, even though I know that there are automatic transmission cars that shift way faster than any human ever could. I get it. I've heard it all before. I've had people I've dated and people I know personally who don't understand why I like driving a manual, but I just do. If I had to get an electric car, even if we don't know how many gears this thing is going to have or exactly how this transmission is going to work, if I can pick the gears myself, I'm going to do it, because having driven a Tesla before, and having pretty aggressively driven a Tesla before, as exhilarating as the speed is, the fact that there is no actual gearing, there's no feel of a shift point, there's no control other than put go pedal down and move, it's boring. And having that feel of a shift point, that push it back in your seat, hit it, and have it kind of let you go and then push you back again, that is always going to be something that I strive to feel when I drive a car, and this seems to have it. We don't know how many times it'll do that. We don't know its top speed, but if, again, it's meeting or exceeding things like the Dodge Hellcat, we're probably in for quite a ride, literally. And the last thing mechanically with this car is that it has an exhaust system, which I guess exhaust isn't exactly the right term, but it is an exhaust system. It makes noise. The sound of a car is something for me that I have always loved, and whenever I've driven electric cars or hybrids or really any car with a muffler, it's boring to me. Yes, EVs are worse than cars with just a muffler on them, because if you really hit a car with a muffler on it, you can get it to kind of open up and you can hear it a little bit. EVs, you don't get any of that. It's just silence and movement. That's it. My daily driver is a Fiesta ST with a Flowmaster exhaust. And my track car is an SRT4, and that thing sounds, well, here, have a listen. They're loud cars, and with that SRT4, it can be very loud. And the fact that Dodge put an exhaust system, which I'm hoping it's more than just a speaker, because I've heard Teslas with the motor sounds hooked up to their speakers and it doesn't sound good. If it's actually like an amplified sound running through pipes that are designed to channel and emit the sound, then 126 decibels of some kind of noise, well, this noise, that actually is kind of neat. I hope it doesn't seem or sound as ricer as the concept seems. And for those of you who don't know what ricer is, it's a car term for race-inspired car enthusiast. Actually, there's a lot of different analogies for rice in the car world. You can also do race-inspired cosmetic enhancements, things like that. Basically, the idea behind a ricer is somebody who slaps a bunch of cosmetic bits on their car or puts a loud muffler on their car but does nothing for performance. This seems to have performance in the bag, so hopefully that sound actually sounds solid, aside from just being loud. Okay, so we've talked about the design, and really I don't have anything bad to say about the design other than I don't think the semi-translucent vegan leather is going to make it into production, and I also don't like the rear buttress length. I think that the roofline's a little weird, but I think the design is solid. And in terms of the mechanical nature of it, if all of this, to some degree, makes it to production and is within the same price point as something like the 360 or whatever, or even getting into Hellcat price territory, I think the muscle car is pretty much going to be here even into the EV era, which is good because certain EVs are not muscle cars, they're just fast. Tesla Model Plaid. And on top of that, it also seems like Dodge is getting rid of some of their higher performance models. Like they've got one more year of production on the Durango Hellcat, which is a full-blown SUV with the Hellcat platform under the hood. So yeah, we're getting rid of those, I guess, and going electric. But then why is Dodge going electric? Well, they're very late to the party, and I can't blame them for holding out as long as they could, because they've made a reputation for themselves of being the fun, cool kids that make super loud, fast cars that are reasonably affordable. And even if you don't have Hellcat money, you can still get a shaker top or some of the really more out there designs, or you can buy a V6, cut the mufflers off, and rev at Honda Civics at stoplights. But the reason why Dodge is making their EVs now is probably the same reason why they released the Dodge Hornet, which is this sort of smaller SUV with a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder making 5 more horsepower than my SRT4, which came out in 2005. It's good to know that turbo 4-cylinders have made leaps in performance improvements. But yeah, it's the same reason they're doing that, which is the fact that across the fleet of vehicles being produced, by 2026, auto manufacturers are going to have a 40 mile per gallon standard. And that is not going to happen if Dodge keeps on making these big ass V8s and irritating bro culture V6s. That's just not going to happen, because you put your foot down in a Hellcat and your overall MPG goes from 18 to 8. So yeah, Dodge is making this EV as well as a couple other options like the Hornet in order to bring up their overall fleet MPG for the cars they make. And I kind of feel like an EV is one way to do it, but I also think there are other ways they could have done it. And this is kind of where I start getting into some of my issues with not specifically EVs, we'll talk about that in a minute, but just how car manufacturers are approaching this raise their MPG standard kind of in the wrong way, in my opinion. Just going to say that now. We'll use Ford for an example. Don't get whiplash. We're going to change over to Ford for a minute. Ford stopped selling all of their cars in the US except for the Mustang. And really, the Mustang is the only one of their lineup now that I'd be interested in, but I'm not really a big fan of trying to leave a Cars and Coffee sideways and running over pedestrians, so I'm probably never going to own a Mustang. But everything else they make is either an SUV, a truck, or an EV SUV with a Mustang badge on it. But before that, we had the Ford Focus, and that had a performance version, 2 performance versions in the RS and the ST, and they did the same with the Fiesta ST, which is, like I said, one of my daily drivers. But those cars then also had hybrid models. They had 4-cylinder models. They had tiny little fuel-efficient everything, and their performance lineup. So you could have a fun car if you were all right with getting 30 miles per gallon, 35 miles per gallon, and then 28 in the city, which is generally what I get. Or if you didn't care for performance and you wanted something just fuel efficient, you could get something like that. When I say something like that, this is what I'm talking about. I should have put the image up sooner. Sorry. But Ford just kind of got rid of those in the US and said, oh, all these fat Americans can just have SUVs and pickup trucks and then the Mustang. And then in Europe, we get badass cars like this. You know how quickly I would go into shameful amounts of debt for a Ford Focus ST wagon? Let's not go there. But Dodge, in my opinion, could have done the same thing. Like, there's nothing wrong with them making an EV, but I feel like they could have done so many other different things alongside making an EV, like resurrecting the Dart or the Neon. I'm a little partial to the Neon, but they could have brought back any of their older sedans. Hell, can you imagine what like a performance 2024 Dodge Omni GLH would have been like? Imagine them bringing back a retro-futuristic style of this. I'm a bit nostalgic, but I think that would have been cool. Because back when Dodge was making things like the Neon, they had the performance version of the Neon, the SRT4, but they also had the fuel-efficient models like the regular Highline and the SE and the base models of the Neon alongside the performance models. And overall, you could get some pretty good gas mileage. I remember making it all the way from where I live in Hagerstown to Ocean City and back on a single tank of gas with my Dodge Neon, or Plymouth Neon. But that totaled to about 43 miles per gallon because it was all highway mileage, and I was a little more of a conservative driver back then. Or maybe even when Dodge made the Dart and were advertising the Dart with 41 miles per gallon. Imagine how good they could actually be in that whole EV plus eco car space if they brought back cars like that. Because now we get into my concerns with the EVs. And really, I only have two. And one is just based on the area in which I live. And that is the fact that because I'm on the East Coast, specifically sort of middle of the East Coast, a lot of our energy comes from fossil fuels. So even if you get an EV and you plug it in, you charge it up and you feel good because you're not killing polar bears, you're still using the power grid, which is running off of fossil fuels. So the infrastructure has to change. That really isn't the fault of anybody, Tesla, Ford, Dodge, whoever. That's nobody's fault except for the government or the state or whoever happens to be in control of the power grid, depending on where you live. But yeah, you're still running your power from fossil fuels. My other concern, and this is more so to do with Tesla, and it's not the fact that their cars are held together with adhesive, my bigger concerns are long-term reliability. I genuinely hope that Dodge, being Dodge, is going to keep in mind the garage mechanic. My SRT4 would have been off the road years ago if I hadn't put the time and effort in to change the suspension, or put a better intercooler on it, or change the alternator, or replace components that really are not too expensive, and even if I didn't do them, a mechanic could do them. But I can buy them and replace them myself. With an EV, and I'm using Tesla as an example for this, you are going to have fewer parts, which is always a benefit. But when you simplify parts down to a handful of key components, each of those key components are going to be significantly more expensive. For example, battery replacements. You kill a battery in a Tesla, yeah, the motors would be good for 150, 200,000, 500,000, whatever Tesla's claiming their new motors are rated for, and that's great. But when you got to replace the battery, you're spending new car money or really, really nice used car money to get a new battery in a car that has been on the road long enough that some people may not even see it as a viable option. Meaning that unless you have the money to replace the battery at a dealership or authorized repair center, you're driving around four wheels of e-waste. So I'll be curious to see how Dodge handles the reliability and maintenance side of EVs. I'm hoping it's built maybe a little better than Dodge quality. I mean, at least their paint stays on now, but hopefully it's built a little better than that. God, I hope it's built better than Tesla's build quality, because I don't want to see panel gaps the size of the, rocket ships they're making somewhere on the car. That'll be nice to see. Either way, I think Dodge did a pretty good job of bringing the muscle car into the EV space. It still bums me out that they didn't consider bringing back some more fuel-efficient versions of their cars to give hybrid models to, or full-blown electric car models to. I mean, hell, they talked about the Fratzog logo and referenced an old car in their event. I'm not saying bring back that car, but you have so many cool cars in your history, like the Dart, the original Dart, or the Duster, which I know was Plymouth, but Plymouth just became Dodge, so maybe bring back the Duster, the Neon, the Caliber, the Omni. Bring back some cool cars from your history and maybe make them hybrids. I think that would be really cool, but overall, that's just something that kind of bums me out. And then, like I said, I tend to be pretty blunt when I talk to people about EVs, because when I see things like Tesla locking down software features within their car so that technically you never really own your car, and I see reliability being a good thing until it's not, and then you have to pay a ton of money for parts because it's so simplified that these key components cost you a car, I just kind of take the approach of, yeah, EVs right now, as they're evolving, are 4 wheels of e-waste. And if you can pay to have that e-waste kept from being e-waste by buying a new car's worth of a battery and putting it in, good on you, but that's not everybody. Hopefully, with manufacturers like Dodge and Ford and hopefully Chevy and a couple others now really getting into that space, and of course we have other manufacturers like Honda and Lexus or Toyota, all these other companies making hybrids and EVs. Hopefully with all of that, we're going to see an improvement to the aftermarket, maybe the general right to repair, so that other companies and other workshops can actually repair the car. And of course, maybe we'll see improvements to how power is delivered so that when you plug in your EV at night and go to sleep thinking happy dreams of saving polar bears, you're not running all of your electricity off of fossil fuels, because that's just how your state does it. Hopefully those things will improve. But that's it. Those are my thoughts on the new Dodge Daytona Charger Banshee SRT EV. Again, it's going to be hilarious to watch that packed onto a banner or onto a brochure somewhere. But those are my thoughts, and kind of my thoughts on EVs. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe if you did. If you didn't like it, you can go ahead and dislike it, but leave a comment letting me know why you didn't like it. And generally just leave comments. I want to know your all's thoughts, because I'm sure a lot of you have some experience with Tesla or other EVs or hybrids, or you're a car guy like me and just like the smell of burning gasoline and the sound of backfires going off as you change gears. Let me know in the comments. I'm actually really interested. Aside from that, thanks again for watching. Hope to see you all in the next video. Make sure to be there and have a good one.